Okay, to anybody out there who is here now or may watch this in the future, welcome. My name is Colin Blanchette. My YouTube channel is Loading the Canon. Um, Probably fairly easy to find. And if Sean and I did this correctly, we're on both of our channels simultaneously. His channel is the Athenaeum Comic Art channel. And we are here ostensibly to celebrate 4 years of Athenaeum Comic Art, though who knows what else we'll ramble on about while we're here. I guess I'll take this opportunity to shill for my hobby, which is I make a zine on the side called Canon.
Nice.
Canonzine.bigcartel.com, though we do have a website and web store imminently approaching.
Ooh.
Yeah. We also have a spinoff called Die With Your Mask On, which is devoted to sort of odd takes on superhero comics. But it's basically just Canon, but just devoted to capes. And a new issue of Canon is in the works. We're working on it. So,
and you should buy the last issue's super great. I actually read it, Colin. So
of Canon.
Of Canon, yes.
Yeah. I'll mention the cover artist here, Kayla E.
Yeah.
Her book from Fantagraphics, Precious Rubbish, is definitely worth reading. And she's all over the place. She's very active promoting herself, and I mean that in a good way. And I think she's going to haul in some awards and get a lot of attention in the future. And she already has, to be honest. But yeah, it's a really good book. She's a great talker, and I really enjoyed talking to her. And I was pretty proud of that interview that we did, actually, which I don't always say.
I read the interview before I got the book, and the interview made me go. I was going to get the book eventually, but I went out and got the book because of the interview. So I highly recommend picking up the zine.
I definitely thought she would be someone to be up your alley when I read the book and talked to her.
Digital, though.
I know she's a digital, not a physical artist, but her themes and the way she works are all very interesting. And she was kind enough to provide an original cover. It's the first time we've had that. Well, I guess that's not true. One of your artists, Noah Van Sciver, contributed a cover to a special issue we did.
And we did an art book with Noah together. We did an art book for Noah, which is not somewhere I can grab it right now, but there's still a few copies available on my website if you are interested in the art of Noah Van Sciver, American cartoonist, the comic art of Noah Van Sciver.
That's right.
Super proud of that. When did we do that? Was that a year ago?
It was a year ago. Yeah. You and I are both like sharks, we just keep moving forward. And so sometimes I forget stuff that we did.
That's a great project. Colin and I have talked about the potential of doing others. There's the cover.
That's the Noah Van Sciver cover.
If anyone ever has thoughts about future art books for Athenaeum artists, let me know. I don't know if Colin and friend Alex want to work on another one of those giant tasks, but it was a passion project for sure.
No, we really enjoyed it, and Noah was so, I don't know, accommodating and just such a pleasure to work with. It was a real highlight. It was a lot of fun to do, and hopefully we did him proud with it. The love was certainly there. That's
yes. Yes.
Well, he's already been talking, but this is Sean Watkins. He is the owner of Athenaeum Comic Art. And this month, it's 4 years in business. It seems longer.
Does it? I don't know. I was reflecting on this is a lot of my life where it feels like it goes by fast and slow at the same time. I can feel every moment of those four years in my bones. But it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah. Why don't you give us the I know you've told this story before, probably on YouTube, but why don't you give us the condensed version of how you got started doing this.
Sure. Yeah. The condensed version is that, obviously a lifelong lover of comics, all things comics, although I took kind of a break. I think a lot of people take a little bit of a break. But my break was kind of the end of high school through college. In grad school, I started to get back into comics. And then really my first job after grad school, I got really kind of back into mainstream comics and discovered kind of more of these alt indie spaces that were really fascinating to me. And I made a decision that I was going to, a lot of my like academic work was in cultural studies, and I wanted to make an effort to read more comics by women, people of color, LGBTQ identified folks. And so I kind of dived into that space. At the same time, my boss at my full-time job introduced me to original art. It wasn't something that I was aware of. I mean, I guess in theory, I knew that someone had to draw a book, but I did not know that you could go and buy those pieces. He is a collector of, Eisner Spirit pages, Pogo pages, things like that. And they were kind of covering his office and at his apartment. And he would invite me into his office. And instead of us talking about work, we would look at heritage for hours and hours and hours at things that I could not afford. Yeah. And I started to collect art myself. And it was really kind of more nostalgic based at the beginning, Green Lantern stuff, because I love Green Lantern. And that's a longer story. But I realized that I was priced out pretty quickly out of a lot of the pieces I was interested in. Around that time, I had my first child, Athena, and I had literally no money. And so as I was diving into indie spaces, I realized that you could just like talk to indie creators and they would sell you their art. And it was much more exciting to me than kind of going through eBay, because I could create relationships through those interconnections. And some of those folks we'd write back and forth quite a bit. And so long story long, I've been listening to Felix Liu's podcast about original art and his kind of success in those spaces. One of the artists that I really loved, Casey Nowak, also happened to live in Ann Arbor, where I moved to. We became friendly. They said that they were going to be selling their art. I asked Casey if I could help them out, and I would do that for free. Originally, I thought that Casey would say no, because who am I? But they said yes. We were very successful very quickly, sold a ton of art, and artists started to reach out to me to see if I would work with them. And I think the big watershed moment is really 4 years ago, taking a trip to Vermont with my spouse's family and meeting with Tilly Walden and Emma Hussinger to chat about their art. And that moment when I started working with Tilly was really kind of a big changing, a big transitional point where kind of I look at as being the official start of Athenaeum, where we had to become much more serious and figure out what it meant to be a business and what it meant to be successful in these spaces, and kind of what growth meant in the work that I was doing. I think I've been very lucky in the sense that there was this big ravenous market for original art in these spaces. That was kind of untapped for new, more modern art. You have some folks who are dealing with kind of alt art from the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. But there wasn't really much happening in an organized way in this more contemporary space. And so we've kind of exploded into this big art rep business. You can see on my website, I did not count. I should know the exact number, but we have a growing number of folks that I work with, and we've done amazing work as a community. But I'll leave it there for now, because I could talk for forever.
I've also not looked recently to see exactly how many, but it's been around 30 for a while. Hovered around 30, which is a substantial number of artists.
Yes.
I also I guess my origins with Athenaeum start with Tilly as well. When you mentioned on Twitter, RIP, that you had some Tilly Walden artwork, and I reached out to you about it, and that's when we started talking just about comics and things in general.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I think a lot of the core kind of group of Athenaeum fans all started through Tilly's work. We have a Discord, a pretty healthy Discord, with a core group of folks who've been there since the beginning. And I think almost all of them came through Tilly. And some of them have the story of sort of like, who is this dude? Is this legit? Is this Twitter account an actual human being? Am I just, burning my money? Original art is interesting, especially if you're addicted to it, because you get it through all different types of means, right? You have established kind of folks. You get it off eBay and you pray that it's not a forgery. You just have to kind of take some risks at time and at certain times if you really want to get something special. But maybe Tilly is kind of the core of the beginnings of Athenaeum. And I don't know, it's interesting. Some people ask me what the core audience is for some of this work, and I'm like, old, middle-aged white men are the core demographics of original art, at least in my world, for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's still I mean, that's the core demographic of my zine, and I'm sure my YouTube channel, and obviously I'm a middle-aged white guy, so clearly that's I'm preaching to my own choir. But you mentioned the Discord. There's a couple of Discordians, if that's a term, in the chat here. And my friend Jeremy's in there. He says you have 34 artists listed on the site right now.
Jesus, it's a lot of people. Yeah.
That is
I've been thinking about it because people give me shit about it sometimes, about having lots of folks playfully, and it's interesting because not everyone is continuously active in the spaces that I inhabit. And so, like with the more mainstream comics, like the Felix Liu guys, they may be working on a monthly book where they have new pages every month. It's consistent, when it's going to come out. They switch from series to series, and they may not do, all the issues within a year. But it's much more consistent than the art that I work with. Typically, it may take someone 3 or 4 or 5 years to come out with a new book. So in the meantime, for a business like Athenaeum to be successful, you got to have, a diversity within your portfolio of folks you're working with to make it work financially. I can't just hope that, folks are going to come out with art consistently. It kind of has to be on their terms. And in order for me to, look at this as potentially a full-time job in the future, I have to be thoughtful with the numbers. That said, we've seen other art reps who have gotten too many and can't do justice to the folks that they're working with. And I think it's a fine balance. It's always really exciting to take on someone that you're excited about, and you really have to think about how they're going to fit in with the community, the vibe that you're going for, as well as do you have the capacity to be able to do justice to each of the people's work. So I've been thinking about that. It's an interesting. We'll see a year from now, and you're like, there's 70 people you work with, Sean. Then you can yell at me.
I definitely remember you worrying about taking on too many.
Back when I had 10.
Yeah, many times. But obviously, some of these people you have to pursue and you have to take on. I mean, if Alison Bechdel wants to work with you, you're going to work with Alison Bechdel. It's a no-brainer.
Yes.
But for the non-Alison Bechdels, which is most cartoonists, what goes into what goes into the equation when you decide to take somebody on? Assuming they're not someone like Alison Bechdel, who I know you've loved her work for a very long time, and you also know she's a brand name that's saleable. That's a win-win. That you don't. It's a no-brainer. But for someone else who might be fill in the blank, what would your process be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's changed over the years. When I first started, it was really about it was less an equation and more of kind of bouncing around and being really excited by folks kind of connecting with me. I was told early on that I had that the folks that I was working with kind of fit together in interesting ways. And I don't know if the art sort of because I feel like I have a pretty big range of children's illustrator art, horror artists, memoir oriented, more realistic, more cartoony. I have a range of styles, I think. But maybe unconsciously I am connecting with people that kind of fit within a certain range, or I don't know. But I think in the beginning, it was just kind of me trying to figure out how to do something that was exciting. And, folks were reaching out to me, some of which I had never read their work before. And I would check out their work and I'd say, wow, this is something really special. And I'd want to kind of bring them into the fold as part of Athenaeum. And I think it's changed a little bit in the sense that because I have so many people, I just can't bring in everybody. And I've been a little surprised that there hasn't been more competition in this space. I think there are sort of some overlaps with other art reps, with folks that are kind of in between mainstream and indie, but nothing too serious, because there's lots of people out there. It's probably because there's not a ton of money to be made in this, to be perfectly honest, unless you kind of can grow it like I have. But now the calculation, I think, is really about folks that either are those Alison Bechdel types that are going to kind of propel Athenaeum into a new space in terms of branding and marketing, as well as I love, obviously, her work, as you said. I can't bring on as many of those kind of folks who are newer to their careers unless I'm truly in love and I want people to see. I want to become an advocate for it. There are still people that I take on that are not going to bring in the same amount of money as an Alison Bechdel will. And as you may know, I don't do this for the money as my number one thing. I'm in it more to build out this community and do right by the artist and give back to a space that I've loved for so long. But I have to be calculated in terms of my own capacity, as well as, bringing on folks that I think are, going to have a successful run at it. They may not make Alison Bechdel money or Nate Powell or Tilly Walden, but we're still going to have success in sales. I think that I've gotten better at doing that over the years. Not everyone has the same amount of success or the same amount of continued success as other artists. But I do feel obligation makes it sound like I need to do this. I feel compelled to kind of raise up the profile as much as I, not to give myself a big head or anything, because Athenaeum is a tiny blip in the world of comics, but it does give me a bit of, it makes me feel good that I can bring some eyeballs to folks. That said, I think as you see the kind of roster build, some of the conversations I have with artists sometimes takes 2-3 years before we end up working together. So something that was in the works for years can look like I just had this conversation today with this person and we're going to start working together. I mean, Alison took a year and a half, if not more, of back and forth. So, there are people in the works that I've been talking to since year 2, year 1. that may eventually join the ranks of Athenaeum. I do want to not grow for forever, right? And we've had a few people leave over the years, not many, but a few, and that makes room for others. But yeah, I always, and we've talked about this many times now. I just don't want to get into a position where I feel like I'm failing the artists, because that would make me feel really bad. And I do not want to do that. My whole life is built through, and people may not know this because I think I come off as pretty chill. My whole life is built on a low to high level of anxiety that's just like constantly there. And that's why I'm good at this job, because I don't like things being left undone, if that makes sense. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. What's now that you have a larger group of people,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, how many of the artists do you think know each other? Is there, like Felix seems to have this sort of football team kind of thing where like he has group trips and they're all sort of, I know, and I realize the money's much larger and it's a different space there,
Mm-hmm.
but clearly there's, a lot of these guys must know each other, right? I mean, they must just have professional interactions outside of knowing Felix. How many of your artists do you think actually know each other or have met each other? And how do you think that any of them think about being on a roster together with artists?
I think we're moving in that direction. Not the football team. I don't watch football. I rebelled. My dad was a quarterback. My uncle was a quarterback. I rebelled by not being into sports or real sports. I was a swimmer. But I am interested in building a community for sure. And some of the artists knew each other before joining Athenaeum. Some of them joined Athenaeum because they knew someone else who had a good experience with me. I have experimented with, we went down to Heroes Con this past year. I was able to table for the first time, and MS Harkness and Matt Allison were there together. I don't think they had met before. And they got along really well. And I'd like to start bringing artists to spaces that I table at. I think that just with the way that this kind of space in comics works, if you happen to be someone who does the small press scene, you probably are aware of some of the folks. But some people are more kind of into the community vibe or happen to be doing more shows, and others are less so. I think there's a core group of people that are really kind of engaged with that process of building out like an Athenaeum community. But it's a work in progress. I think I love the idea of being able to look at us as a team that are kind of propelling each other forward and upward. But it's definitely a work in progress that, some artists are more kind of, you do comics for a reason, right? And some folks are more just focused on the art and less on sort of even the marketing or, getting themselves out there. And so it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I think, just Colin, like the types of communities that I like to build, both in terms of the artists, but also collectors as well. So that's kind of the ideal for me. And yeah, like the Felix model is pretty cool, right? Being able to travel and like go, I don't know, they all went on a trip somewhere. That was pretty cool. I don't bring in the same kind of money to be able to pay for all the artists to go somewhere just yet. But, being able to provide housing for artists at Heroes was pretty cool. I was going to bring someone else who wasn't able to come at the last minute. So, we're moving into what I consider more of the like mainstream comic art rep kind of spaces. That's the goal.
Sure. I know that you've had a harder time getting the small press shows.
Oh yeah.
To give you a table, which, I don't know, you and I have talked about that offline. I personally find it a little puzzling. It just seems like it'd be a no-brainer, especially since it would facilitate artists coming,
Yeah.
which is what they want, but I know, you did Heroes,
Mhm.
that has a rep as a friendly show to non-mainstream work. Yeah, is that are those kind of shows something you're looking to do more of in the future? And is that model of, kind of bringing artists or teaming up artists while they're there to table together and kind of present a semi-united front? Is that appealing to you in the future?
Yes, I have lots of thoughts. I will say PCX in Philly, they have offered
That's right.
to. I've worked with them. Gina and Tom are amazing. Philadelphia is an amazing comic scene. I've tabled there a couple years. I'm not this year because I'm exhausted and can't make it work. There's just too many things going on. So they've been a delight to work with and have been incredibly supportive. I'm at a point where I think, made a mark in this space, and I have brought in lots and lots of money to certain artists, at least. I am not going to spend a lot of time trying to navigate the interesting politics of small press shows because it hasn't been fruitful in the past. I am happy if someone would like to invite us to table at a small press show. More than willing to do that, but if I'm going to be realistic in terms of building out an audience of people who are going to buy original art, that's going to be more of the mainstream shows. And I don't want to badmouth any small press show in particular. I love them all, right? Like I've been to them many, many times, but it's not a space that is currently super inviting to me as an art rep. And so where are the places that people are buying art? It's mainstream shows. Where are the folks that are curious about indie art? Mainstream shows. They may go to some of the small press shows too. There's some overlap, but the biggest bang for your buck is really getting into those spaces where serious collectors are. And it's less wear and tear on my back as I used to go to SPX with like a huge backpack with all these portfolios and connect with locals. I'm happy to do that. It's just, again, an issue of capacity as well. Where am I going to be successful? Where are my, artists going to be successful? And honestly, if you just look at the numbers, those larger, more mainstream shows are where there's more people, right? And more people means additional opportunities to share with the world that there is comic book art, and there's comic book art in these genres, right, of books. And so I don't know, it's interesting. Again, like I don't want to sound too I don't want to shit on these folks too much, but if folks want me to be there, they can ask me to go there, ask me to table. And honestly, I have a degree in pop culture. I could bring lots of education as well to these spaces. They have their own thing going on, and that's okay. These spaces have been these spaces for a long time, and they evolve and change too. But again, it's kind of where do I feel like I can grow? And I think sometimes in indie spaces we don't adapt as much as we need to, if that makes sense. IC3 is yes, I went to IC3 as well this year, which is a new indie comics creator con. I think I may have some of them in the wrong order. Sure. That's an up and coming show that I think that's run through Comic Art Fans, which is for those that everyone is aware of this, but that is watching, but is a community where folks post their original comic book art. They're expanding into more of indie, whatever we could talk about what indie means, but spaces that celebrate these kind of independently or small press or creator owned books, which I think that has some interesting overlap between the two spaces. That could be pretty cool in the coming years. I tabled there too.
Yeah. Is that one in Florida as well, or?
There's talk of expanding. That one was for the first year was in New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
But they're talking about the potential of running it in other spaces in the future.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, they're based in Florida, right? Comic Art Fans, isn't
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, you've gone to their other show, OAX. Have you tabled there or have you just attended?
I was able to table with Matt Allison last year. So it wasn't an official Athenaeum table. It sounds like we'll be tabling this coming year in February or in 2026. But we were able to kind of take up some of Matt's space, and it was amazing. It was amazing to see how many folks are really kind of interested in this different type of art. OAX, I've really enjoyed. I've gone the last 2 years, and a lot of the art is more mainstream comic superhero works. You have Scott Eater's table, which is kind of the island, the island of OAX. But folks are really curious, and it was great. I mean, I sold a bunch of pages. It helps that Matt Allison is a popular creator in both worlds. But I was pleasantly surprised. The first year I went, I wasn't sure if it was going to be the vibe that I was looking for. But once you start digging in a little bit deeper, you realize that, these collectors are pretty inquisitive, and they are looking for new work. Sometimes they're looking for deals. Indie comics tends to be a little bit cheaper than buying a Neil Adams page, but I had a really good experience there. That's probably part of the reason that I'm looking more at these mainstream shows, because I have had many more sales at these shows, kind of ironically, right?
I'm not surprised. I mean, the most I've ever spent on original art was at a Emerald City Comic-Con, which is hardly it's the exact opposite of a small press show. It's basically everything that's wrong with comic shows. But you get a bunch of artists in one room, and it's a good opportunity to save your pennies and go in and buy some art. I'm kind of fascinated by OAX because it strips away all of the other bullshit, and I don't say bullshit in a bad way, because I love a lot of the other bullshit, but it is fun to go to a place where there's only art. I mean, 5 or 10 years ago, I would have, been drooling to get into that place, and they used to have these original art only shows in New York, I never went to, but I do love the purity of that idea that it is just like, getting down to stuff you can hang on your wall. There's a comment here from Marcus Y. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. What's OAX? Original Art Expo. It's put on by Comics Arts Fans. Google it. It'll come up quick. If you're not,
I think Marcus knows what it is, but
okay. He's helping us out.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
I figured
for the many lay people that are going to watch this in the future. Yes, it's a big.
If you have any interest in original art, you should go visit Comic Art Fans. I don't use it personally, but I've certainly used it looking for things or just researching things. It is a great resource, and of course, if you're buying and selling, it's a great place to go look, and it's also a great place to just go check out people's stuff if you want to see. I love John Byrne. I wonder what kind of John Byrne original art is out there. Well, there's going to be hundreds of pages of his art on people's galleries on CAF, and it's worth checking out.
And I think if you're a researcher, if you feel like an archaeologist, when I was a kid, I wanted to be Indiana Jones when I grew up. Comic Art Fans is a space where you can kind of see the journey of art. I recently, I can't remember the number, but the first issue of the first comic I ever remember buying, Batman 491 or something like that. The cover, I've been kind of curious where the cover was for years and years. It got sold in the past 6 months, I believe. And now I can see that it does exist and that someone has it. And so it's kind of neat to be able to see where these pieces kind of land and how they transition to other people's collections. And, it just fulfills that sort of like researcher side of me as well in a kind of more documented space. And you do wonder sometimes what people post versus what they don't post, right? Because people don't post every bit of their collection. I have a personal account that I have like 6 things on and that are not that exciting because I never updated it. I have a ton of stuff that I think is actually far better than what's up there. So it's always curious to kind of see the lineage of some of these pieces.
Yeah. I have a roundabout comment. We'll get to a question in just a second, but basically about something like CAF. And we've brought up Felix of Felix Comic Art a couple times already, and his wonderful podcast that you and I have both enjoyed over the years. And it was amazing as someone who collected in isolation. It was amazing to be made aware of this world of collectors out there that I didn't know existed. Most of them operating at an income level above mine, and the interests weren't always aligned, but I was always fascinated by that community that existed. One of the things that I've really liked about Athenaeum's rise is that it is so much more of a ground level operation that somebody can get a hold of you. They can email you, they can send you a message, they can talk to you. 2, that you have pieces that are affordable. And I mean, I don't want to make light of it. There's people that $100 is just not doable.
Sure.
But if you do want to save some money and go after something, you can find work on Athenaeum from a wide variety of artists that is quote unquote affordable. Way more than you could if you were going to look on Albert Moy's site. That's just not the kind of art he's selling. That's not a knock on Albert Moy. It's supply and demand.
He doesn't mind. I think he's doing fine.
He's doing fine. Exactly. Like he's selling to who he's selling, and if you don't want to buy it, okay,
Sure.
But I think that it can be discouraging to some people if they were maybe to just look at a portfolio from someone who's got nothing but Batman art in it and realize, shit, I'm not going to be able to afford this. This is the price of a car, Whereas if, maybe you read the Casey Nowak book, or, you read a Noah Van Sciver book and you think, I wonder what's out there. And you go looking, you can find pieces that you can enjoy. I think that's really important. I mean, when I got into it, my first major purchase was $200. And which, by the way, was a screaming deal. I didn't even realize what a good deal it was.
Yeah.
But I just got an amazing deal. But for me, $200 was like, that's 10 books. I mean, I was used to spending money on comics, but not just dropping a couple hundred or a few $100s in one go. And you have to work your way up to that. And luckily, we all have kind of a certain madness that lets us work our way up to whatever we can afford very quickly. But I guess as you've gotten bigger, how important is it to you that the work is accessible to a wider variety of incomes than that might be at some other original art only spaces?
It's one of my primary concerns, actually. I mean, I think, I remember listening to a Felix podcast where he was talking about, I don't remember the context, but he was saying, it's really not worth his time to mail someone a $200 piece of art, right? He can sell a $10,000 piece of art, a $15,000 piece of art, and that's where he's making his money. I look at that, and I think what he means, and I think he was saying the same thing that I think, which is you got to have an entry point for folks. And every single conversation I have with artists that I work with or folks that I'm thinking about working with is around accessibility, right? Particularly in this space, which is the thing that's different than Felix's space is, there isn't the same sort of, at least currently, the same sort of like trading and flipping later on that I think some of the stuff that he works with. So folks that are buying it are not necessarily looking at it as an investment. They're really the fans of the art. And I think that I am still able to do that because we are not, big time, like some of these other art reps are. Because I think if you sell stuff for cheap and then someone flips it later, you're really not doing justice to the artist or the art, right? But I'm lucky in that, at least for the time being, I always want to have accessible pages for fans and for people like myself who, buying a $200 page, buying I won't say which piece of art that's hanging in my wall, but I bought a cover to something for $400, which I could sell for several thousand now. But at the time, $400 was like weeks and months of conversations with my spouse to justify a huge expenditure like that. I think part of it is that I started in that sort of like, didn't have a lot of money to spend. I didn't have, the ability to sell other things to feed my hobby. And realizing that if you're going to build out an audience for this, and I think that's kind of where I'm at as I'm building and building, you have to have things that people can buy. And, even with Alison Bechtel, there's a couple pages I have that we haven't put out there yet. That were like t-shirt designs that have some original art and some like printed out stuff that I'm going to sell for significantly less than the pages that we have on the website. And that was a conversation I had to Allison was, do you have any, drafts, roughs, thumbnails, things that you'd be willing to part with for a little bit less? I do not think that it diminishes the other pieces of art. I think it only helps kind of celebrate, and in the production stuff, I think you like it as well. Like I love seeing how, the final page, where it started and where it kind of ended is fascinating to me. So if I can get those pages out into people's hands, I think we're doing a service to the community.
I agree. I bought a rough of a MS Harkness page from you. And I remember you saying, well, the finished page is available. And I thought, no, I want the rough page. That's actually what I want is the process on the page. But obviously not everybody feels that way.
Sure.
But I agree with you. I don't think it diminishes at all. I think for some people, they're never going to be able to afford the super pricey page. And for some other people, they might just be young. Maybe they're spending a couple hundred now might lead to them being a bigger customer in the future when their earning rises up. I remember us talking about you'd have people who would sniff around with smaller pieces kind of to check out and see, if you're legitimate or to see what the process is like. And then they might come back for more. Do you still get a lot of that, or are you now established enough that people don't have to sort of vet you before they start working?
I don't see that as much anymore. I think partially because the world has changed and people are going after the pages that they want more. So I think it's also Athenaeum's like a real, like I have a lot of legitimate artists on my roster now, and there's a lot of internet history. You can go on Comic Art Fans and see a lot of pages that have come from Athenaeum. So it legitimizes what I'm doing. But I also think, I don't know, people like aren't buying as much at the lower end, I think, as a few years ago. I think folks are just like getting what they want. You know what I mean? There isn't as much of that sort of like, who is this person going on? Yeah.
You've done a lot more commissions lately with your artists, which
yes,
I remember us talking about that in the past. And those come with their own headaches and logistical problems. Felix has talked about that on his podcast, how he basically makes sure there's going to be zero knucklehead behavior. If you sign up to do one, you're going to do it. And you bet, like he's practically berating his artists, like you need to be professional and do this, or don't even offer a list,
Yeah.
And your artists have been turning out some fucking unbelievable commissions in the short time you've been doing them. how has that gone for you? Have they been successful?
Yeah. We had talked about this in the past, and I had a commission stage of my collecting, and then I got out of it. I had a few that I wasn't super thrilled about, and I was like, it's not really worth it. And so I just figured, well, the indie comics folks don't have the time for this nonsense, and they're not going to be the creators are not going to be super interested in it. And it wasn't really on my radar. I didn't think folks would want it. And then, we opened Tilly up, and gosh, we sold a lot of commissions for her, for fairly expensive commissions, although cheap compared for what Tilly puts out there.
Yeah.
That always drives me crazy, is that you can be a Batman artist and throw together not to crap on anyone specific, but like you can throw together something that it doesn't look that great and charge so much money, and because we're in indie spaces with like multi-Eisner Award winning Tilly Walden, who's like beloved, critically acclaimed person, and our prices are actually far more accessible, I think, than mainstream comics. And you get a piece that's like it's like a collection defining piece for some people, for a pretty good deal, I think. But so we did Tilly's, that was hugely successful. And then, I think some of my artists have been reaching out to me. They see kind of those pages going up. It's a little bit of a combination of some collectors will reach out specifically and say, "Oh, can this specific person, are they open? Are they available to do a commission?" But it seems like, I think, well, there's a couple things. I think with the way that the economy is going, I think that the book sales and things and sort of opportunities for new projects are not as prolific as they once were, and so artists are more open to taking on additional ways to bring in money. So there's a little bit of that, but also like the demand has increased. I was like, why would anyone have an art rep to do commissions? Like the art rep, like, it's you're selling something and then you give them a thing. I was a little mistaken in the amount of work that's involved with going back and forth and negotiating and talking about the right things and keeping them in the loop when the artist takes too long. Although the vast majority of my artists are like very, very quick with it. So there's a lot of work on an art rep side. I do feel like I earn my commission with those commissions, let me tell you. But I think it's something that we'll continue to do if folks are interested in getting them. The other thing is that a lot of the artists I work with are so focused on their book for 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. And they've actually been really excited to have something else to focus on for, a few weeks, a few months. Yeah. I've actually had quite a few people that we've done commissions with say, like, I had so much fun. I didn't even remember, enjoying doing work like this. Someone like Tilly will take on any subject within reason, which is exciting for her to just, instead of doing these sort of like, very Tilly-esque worlds, she can put together a Batman piece or whatever. Like it's just kind of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I think part of the appeal of commissions as a collector is that you get to like be part of the process, right? You get to like give someone a prompt, and sometimes those prompts can turn out to be even more amazing than what you had in your head. So if all things are firing on the right in the right way, you can get something that's really, really great. I will say, and Newell Stingray is on here. I think he has a really great strategy he has a specific sort of genre that he works with in terms of commissions. But I think the smart thing to do as a collector is to really do your homework about the creator and find something that's going to fit into their wheelhouse. It doesn't have to be like a Tilly, it doesn't have to be all like on a sunbeam piece. It can be something completely different, but it has to be, I don't know if I'm making sense. It has to fit into their strengths if it's going to be super amazing, right? Like it has to, I don't know, Tilly is really great on like kind of ethereal, like out of space or, clouds or things like that. Find a character that fits in those spaces that may be different than what she's used to drawing, but kind of leans on her strengths. Like a Matt Allison, machines and like intricate designs and I don't know, 80s pop culture stuff he loves, he's going to go wild with, right? You have to be kind of thoughtful. It can't just be, I want this person to do this thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think commissions are always an interesting topic to hear what people think. Like you said, you did it early on and then sort of moved out. I didn't do them at first and then moved into having more of them done, and almost all very positive experiences. I had one or two where I was a little disappointed, but most of them I was, over the moon with. But I really think that, like you said, being really intentional about who you're asking and what you're asking them to do is key to getting something you're happy with. But so many people say they buy original art. One, they want to have it on their walls, but a lot of people like the interaction. They like to have either an interaction with the artist, or they want to have an interaction with someone like you, to talk about what they're doing and, to be involved. A lot of people are collecting in isolation, more or less, I think a commission is something you can kind of look at and say, one, that's an original piece, but two, it's an original piece that wouldn't exist if I hadn't asked for it. And I think that's something special. Tilly did that Terry and the Pirates piece, which was huge and kind of magnificent. And I remember it really making a wave in your Discord when you first posted that. Everyone was just blown away by that piece. And that feeling's been repeated several times over with, some of Noah's pieces, some of Tilly's other pieces. I don't know. I think some people are trepidatious about getting into commissions. I recommend it for collectors, at least to give it a shake. Don't go ask the Batman guy to give you a $10,000 commission for your first commission. That's, the risk to reward ratio might be a little off, but if you find someone that's an artist that will treat it passionately, I just think you can't really beat the experience.
I agree. And I think, if you really want a way to give back to the artist community, the comics community, commissions is a great, often people are opening commissions because they need some money. Sure. Right. Well, why else would they do that? Right. Like there's not many folks who are like just doing it because they are excited to spend their time doing something else. I think particularly in, like the IC3 space, the sort of indie small press spaces, it's an opportunity to see an up and coming artist and give them, contribute to their career and get something really cool. I've seen some folks get these like tremendous cover quality pieces for fairly inexpensive, because someone wants to get their name out there. And I think for creators as well, sometimes and it's easier when you have an art rep that can do this, but sometimes working with a collector that is a really well respected collector, doing, putting a little bit of extra effort into their commission means that, thousands of eyeballs are going to see that piece, and they may, ask for commissions, or they may buy your books and then buy pages, right? So it's a little bit of a marketing game as well within these spaces. So I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Sometimes I haven't had anyone, I've heard stories of people being like, I got the commission, I was so angry about it, it wasn't worth the money, and then they like complained to the art rep. It hasn't happened to me thus far, may happen at some point. It's weird to me as a collector because I would just not buy a piece of art from them again, right? Like it's like my lesson to be learned. But I suppose when you start getting up into like the tens of thousands of dollars range, then you have a right to be a little bit more upset. But I feel like you kind of know what you're getting. And someone said that maybe it was Newell or Natome, that you got to do your homework, right? If you're not doing your homework, you got to have some ownership in what you get in the end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's we talked about that art collecting community. Those guys talk. I'm talking like kind of the bigger money guys. Like they talk and they'll tell you, oh, you want a commission by this guy? Well, you might be waiting 5 years and it might not ever show up, and you might not, you'll have to hound him to death. It might not be worth the effort. Speaking of that sort of community, which, I think you're kind of an interesting figure in that you kind of interact from bottom to almost the top. I don't know if you're getting up to the tippy top with the huge whales you spend gobs of money, but you certainly interact with some people who spend some good amount of money. And an organization like CFA APA that you're still a member in good standing. I'm a former member.
Do you remember what it means? Do you remember? Can you say the
Comics and Fantasy Art Amateur Press Association?
Nice. I can't always. That was a trick. I wasn't gonna be able to do it.
I still wear the hat all the time, which helps. It's my default cap, But I found that an interesting group of guys in that, their interests often didn't really align with what I was necessarily into, but it didn't mean that I didn't find them talking about it interesting. So while I might not give a shit about pulps or, golden age art or, some of the more illustrative, the Jeffrey Catherine Jones, Bernie Wrightson type, that those guys aren't really in my wheelhouse. I still was fascinated and always interested to hear about what these people were into. What's been your experience interacting with that kind of collector, the people who might not be quite as aware of alternative comics, underground comics, small press comics?
I don't know, man. I think you'd be surprised. You were in the group for a year. So this is an amateur press association, which used to be really big back in the 70s, 80s, and earlier. It's a publication that just had its 40th year anniversary. And it caps at 50 members at any one time. Everyone writes these articles. Now it's 3 times a year. And it doesn't get published outside of this one physical publication. So there are, 60 copies maybe that are published. Some go to some of the libraries and museums and things like that. But it's a very small run, and it's mostly for folks in the, as part of that group. That said, all of the articles are owned by the people who write them, so we could take them and publish them elsewhere. But those folks, many of them are much older than I am and have been collecting for much longer than I have, and their interests are just different in some ways. But the more that I've kind of stuck around, the more that I realize there are overlaps in interests. I don't know if you're still on the listserv, but I brought up Paul Chadwick's Concrete recently, and there were like 6 people who have originals from Paul Chadwick from the 80s, I would imagine.
Including me.
Yeah, including you. So I was surprised. I think there's the collecting bug for some, is relegated to that nostalgic era. And for it, I think it's smart to focus your collection, right? So you don't want to, you can't collect everything. And if you try to collect everything, then you become a hoarder and your family abandons you, right? So I think being narrow sometimes can be helpful in this collection, especially when you have tons and tons of pages. But I think, if anything that I've learned in my short period on Earth is that you'd be surprised what's underneath the surface with a lot of folks. And people are interested. They may not talk about it. It may not be their like primary collecting space, but true collectors, I think, have a little, they keep their eyes open, they keep their ears open, their eyes open to interesting kind of unique things. I mean, I think not that this conversation is all about Felix Liu, but right, Felix has had a lot of success with bringing in some of those folks into more contemporary spaces. Mm-hmm. So I think it can happen. It is happening. And, you know, I've always been someone who's wanted to be around people that have lots of knowledge, particularly about things that I don't know much about. Right. So I don't know anything about pulps. I don't really know a lot of strip history. I mean, I don't know half the stuff that you're into either. Right. And that's kind of the beauty of the community, is that we have an opportunity to learn from each other. And I'll probably never own a Spirit page, but like, they're pretty cool looking. And maybe I'll pick up a book and figure out why folks were so into it. Like, I think the history is really fascinating. And those folks, they'd buy art from me. So I'm happy to keep them around.
I was curious about that. Without naming names, I was curious if you had done any transactions with any of those guys.
More and more actually. And I've had conversations with kind of the folks who've been around a long time they just kind of want to know, like, what is Athenaeum about? Who are these artists? Sometimes I'm surprised at the names that people aren't aware of in the certain circles, right? Folks to me that are like the biggest names in comics, for some people, they've never heard them before, or heard of them. And there, I try not to place judgment on it, because I don't know, there's tons of stuff that hundreds of thousands of people read every day, right? There are strips from the 40s that I have never heard of that were like the most popular strip of all time, that were around for 50 years. And I'm like, I never even read a single strip, So you got to go into it with an open mind. And I think the more open you are, the more open others are, right? And like, I'm surprised. Like, I've gotten more and more of the kind of, I don't want to say older generation, but folks that have been doing this longer than me, who have been buying art from me, or at the very least are very interested and are thinking about the pieces that they're going to pick up. Sometimes they'll buy art that's like not even, they buy it because it looks cool, right? Yeah. And it may fit their aesthetic more than they've read the book. They'll buy a page and then read the book,
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely done that kind of thing before. I mean, the price has to be obviously right to do something like that. But the question of why do we collect? Why are we interested in these things? I mean, obviously, the vast majority of these collectors, I think, is nostalgia. But that isn't necessarily true for a lot of the work you represent, or Felix for that matter. It's contemporary work. And so at a certain point, like, what are your aesthetics? What are you interested in here?
Well, it's an interesting conversation that we could dive into more. Probably not here, but I think nostalgia is interesting to me because I think you can be nostalgic for spaces that maybe you weren't part of, right? Like so. Like, why do I buy art? Because I love comics as a kid, right? Like the pieces may not be from when I was a kid, but they're still fulfilling that sort of childlike wonder that I had for these like spaces that people create, the magic that people create. So I always think about like nostalgia and like kind of operationalizing that term and kind of diving into it. Like, what does it mean? And how much are we kind of compelled by like what we were when we were 12, right? I'm not going to buy any of the, I mean, I probably would, like, and you probably would too, buy some pieces from when we were kids. But yeah, right. But we're also the hoity-toity, like, indie people now, so whatever. But I think a lot of it has to do with some sort of pull to the past, or some sort of pull to the sort of first hit you get of comics, like, right, like sort of that first joyous experience. So I think nostalgia is tied into a lot of the hobby, even when you're collecting more mainstream contemporary stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've been playing with that idea for a while.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I do think I can definitely understand why, as you get older, things might narrow down to that field where you're just kind of like, I'm focused on this stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But while you're younger, I would, you know, obviously, you know how I feel. I would encourage everybody to cast the widest eye possible and try to find things that surprise you and realize there are more things out there. And yeah, someone can just go to your website and look around and see the wide variety of material. I mean, is someone like a Matt Allison compared to an Emma Hunsinger compared to Noah Van Sciver, you know, that's like wildly different styles, wildly different modes of storytelling. Um, you know, but I do hope that the people who go in ooh and ah over a Matt Allison page will realize that some of these other people are doing work that they might enjoy, you know, that they might not, you know, that might not be the sort of thing they would just pick up, but maybe they'll go, maybe I'll check out this Noah Van Sciver guy. He's got 20 books, you know.
He must be doing something right.
Yeah, you know.
There's an art book that this weird place put together. Yeah, I mean, I like to, and maybe we all kind of create these spaces where, like, I've created a space that I would have loved as a collector, right? I used to go to Cadence. I used to go to Splash Page. I used to go to Felix's site. I used to go to
Inky Knuckles.
Inky Knuckles, less so, but yes. Yeah. I didn't really know about them until later. Yeah, but yeah. And I was a crazy person. I would bookmark the pages that I was interested in, and I would go probably once a week, if not more, because I would just have them on tabs on like my iPad, and I would click refresh, and I'd be like, "Ooh, new stuff," and I'd look through, and I would look for folks that I would be, you know, that I was excited about. One of the first artists I was super into, Mike Henderson, who did a book called Nailbiter, which was this horror series. I love Mike Henderson's art. I forget which dealer art rep he's with. But I, you know, would stare at those pages for forever, and I would look at all the other artists too. So my hope is that, you know, folks are inquisitive and that they aren't just interested in the one. You can look at the algorithm. You can look at the analytics on my website to see if that's true, and I don't know how much it is true. I think for some folks it is, but I don't know. I'd be interested in this weirdo like independent art rep space, and you know who these other folks that are being represented. I mean, I think we work with so many award-winning cartoonists now, like it's kind of ridiculous. So there's got to be something to it, right? There's got to be something interesting. And I was going to say, like, as you were pointing out some of the artists, like, I think the commonality is, to me, they're all awesome, right? Like, they're all unique, interesting talents, and have, you know, different areas where they really excel. Like, Emma Hunsinger, I think her ability to depict extreme emotion in very simple lines is some of the best stuff out there. Matt is so hyper detailed, and like his stories are so complex and deep. I think you can read it and not get any of that, and still really enjoy the experience. But I think if you really dive in and see some of the deeper meanings that he's playing with, it can be an incredibly rewarding experience. I don't know. I can talk about a lot of the artists and why I love them, but I think they all bring something kind of unique to the table, all that's worth exploring in one way or another. Mika Song, who does these children's books, are super fun. The person who collects, one of the people that collects her art, is like a super established collector who's been doing it for a long time, who loves Mika. I would never have assumed that this person would collect you know, art from Mika, and yet they bought a lot of pages. So I think it's an interesting space. You can stereotype it all you want, or not you, but like in general, people can stereotype it. I think it's a more inquisitive space than you would think, and maybe that it's just the people I deal with. Maybe the other art reps don't have that sort of like really interesting. Like I have, you know, very young, and by young I mean like 22-year-olds who are buying certain pieces, and I have late 70s people buying other pieces. I get to interact with the gamut. What's interesting is meeting some of these people in real life, and you know, some people I thought were much older were actually much younger than I expected, and vice versa. So it's an interesting the space I live in is very interesting, we'll say. I was just laughing at a comment. We don't have to get into it.
Yeah. I know, Marcus. We're not taking the bait. The Tom Hardy meme, that's bait. Not to get into a depressing subject, but how were world politics affecting?
Oh yeah,
your artists and perhaps maybe your business.
That's a good question. We won't get into specifics in my own political stance, but I think you can probably tell from everything I do, and represent and say. But I think in terms of the tariffs and the growth of AI and the expenditures around publishing that continue to increase. I think it's not a secret to say that folks are struggling across the board. Publishers are struggling. Artists are struggling. For Athenaeum, we're still growing overall. I think I had alluded to this earlier, but I've been surprised at the pieces that I consider to be more affordable. Generally aren't selling as well as they used to. So those $200 pages to $500 pages, I'm surprised at some of the like pieces that I would die to have been up longer than they would have 2 or 3 years ago. And I think that's partially because people don't have the money to spend on something that's a frivolous, a purchase. I think people are much more calculated. They're buying less. We've seen a lot of collectors burn out of the hobby in the past year or so. A number of collectors that I know have burnt out of the hobby. I think it's it's a scary time in general, not to make comics seem like a bigger thing than it is. It's a niche space, but I'm really concerned about the future of small and independent press. I think it will always exist. Comics will always exist. They're for sure. Decades, people have been like, this is the end of comics. We'll never have. I was in Target yesterday, and don't shop at Target. They're bad. But I was at Target, and they have a vinyl section, right? Like these things stick around. Is it as big as a vinyl section as when I was a kid and my dad would stay in the music store for hours and hours? No, but these things aren't going to go away. That said, I think we're going to have a contraction in the comics space, the small alt press space. And unfortunately, I think that not all artists are going to continue to be comic book artists because there's not a lot of money in it. And so for me, the business is changing, which is why I have to adapt, and I need to start building a larger audience, starting to go to the more mainstream shows, trying to get folks that may see Athenaeum as an opportunity to continue their hobby, their collection, their love, and not have to spend as much money as other spaces. And I have to look at Athenaeum as a collective, right? Like, what are the things that we can do together as a group of artists to help, help each other, help get work, help kind of continue to inspire each other to be in the space that's really, really difficult. Why? Why continue in a space where you get underpaid for everything? You have to, negotiate with collectors that may not want to spend as much money as you're asking for pieces of art. It can be really demeaning in some ways. And I think it's just going to get worse with the way that things are moving in terms of, these companies being willing to take a chance on interesting, unique art that, isn't more like IP oriented. It makes sense in a capitalistic system, right? You're going to want to do the things that have already generated income, right? Why take a chance on some like weirdo book that may or may not be interesting to people? So I think that we can weather the storm. I think that we can come together and like I said, find ways to kind of bring in newer audiences for original art, as well as for the books, right? Because I think there's plenty of people who are buying comics that may not be in the space yet. But I think it's going to be really tough for the next few years. That said, Athenaeum is still doing really well. I think partially because we've brought in commissions, which is a whole new like revenue generating endeavor. But also we have, you know, the higher end folks that sell good amounts of art. The people that, you know, have like a ravenous audience for their art continue to help bring in that money. So each year we have sold more than the previous year, and I think we'll be on target to do that again this year. Each year, I think there's no way that I'm going to be able to do that. Like as long as I can get anywhere near what I did the year before, it would be great. But we've grown each year, so that's been pretty good. But again, you know, I've had to diversify with the artists that I have to ensure that this is something that's going to be successful in the long term.
Have you had any chatter from your artists about the mess with Diamond? Has that impacted your world at all?
That's a good question. I haven't heard a ton from my artists. I mean, I know of it more from, you know, kind of listening to the comics podcast world, and certain books, you know, struggling because they are stuck somewhere. I know a few publishers have dealt with that, but nothing like the Emil Ferris kind of COVID story. That was a big deal. Diamond, I just kind of know. I try to follow what's going on. It seems like it's a new saga every day. But I imagine that's a bigger hit for publishers and for comic book shops than it has been, at least for folks talking to me about. You know, for me, it's like hearing more about like trying to sell a book has been much more difficult than it was in the past.
I think that aspect of it, people being able to get paying work, that's going to be affected also downstream by the Diamond stuff too. I think for all of Diamond's faults, and they were legion, they would carry almost anything nowadays, the last, few years, because they had to. And so there's a lot of, self-publishers, a lot of very small little companies that had that outlet to get into shops that aren't going to have that anymore. I'm dealing with the Diamond thing almost every day at work. I don't expect it to impact the average person, but I'll say even just as a person who buys comics, it's already made my life harder. I'm going to miss out on people's work. And for me, it's like, okay, I saved money I didn't even know I was going to spend, right? But for them, that's a sale they're not getting. That's one more doofus online not saying, hey, I bought this book and you should check it out, and we know every little bit of word of mouth helps. I don't expect it to impact everyone A to B kind of, but I do think there's, just the tightening of the distribution. The distribution was already a mess. There's already no money. Now there's no exposure. What do you do?
Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of, those that are even paying attention to like Diamond stuff. There are these problematic entities that, are falling apart, or we're being critical of them. But at the same time, in a very niche space, they were the things that kind of held, that they were the glue. They weren't great, but they were kind of what made things run. And it's sort of like, I don't know, Lord of the Flies isn't a great analogy, but like, yay, the thing is gone. We're on our own. Now what? What does it look like? Who's going to step up and do the work? That's the thing that drives me crazy sometimes is, the hypercritical nature of kind of some of the spaces I inhabit. Who's going to do the work? Who's going to step up and make sure that we don't fall apart, right? And that we don't disappear. Like there's a lot of people who are willing to voice their concerns and their critiques, but who's going to be out there working? And not to say that Diamond was, but more speaking generally, very few people make these spaces run, I think you'd be surprised in how few folks, and even when you look at Athenaeum and maybe you assume that I have like a staff that works with me. I have one person that comes sometimes and helps me scan things, and my kids help put the stickers, and they'll write notes, thank you notes occasionally to the returning collectors. These are like mom and pop, even like the like bigger small press publishers. It's not a huge operation. And so, yeah, we can be critical of like, oh, you let this AI thing get through or blah, blah, blah. Like, there are good people working at a lot of these spaces that are navigating the same shitty, spaces that a lot of people navigate. They're well-intended. They're trying to do their best. And if we just destroy everything, I hope that the people who are critical are going to step up and create their own spaces to help comics, right? Like, I feel obviously passionate about this because, I've had a little bit of critique of Athenaeum in the past. I haven't heard it in a while, but it's sort of like taking advantage of artists. And I'm like, okay. I literally spend every waking moment doing this, right? I will be in my office at 2 a.m. while my kids are asleep and my spouse is asleep, packing $100 piece of art to ship to wherever, right? Like this isn't something that I'm doing to make a fortune or to like exploit the workers, right? This is something that is truly, hopefully, meant to help people. And I make a little bit of money from it. That's great, but I don't know. I think I'm worried about the way culture is moving in not being constructive and like let's build something new, right? And to be fair, there are examples of folks who are like new distributors who are coming out who are trying to create spaces to support indie creators. Is it Power Pulp? I can't remember. I'm going to blank on the name. Something like that. Those folks are great. Those people are the I think I'm rooting for them as being a way to support the community. But you gotta put your Power Pulp, yeah. You gotta put in the work, right? Like you gotta put in the work if you want this stuff to exist. And you've seen it, I've seen it. So many artists over time, they can't make a living. They want to have a family. They want to buy a house, God forbid. They want to live a normal life or a more typical life, let's say. And they can't do it through comics. I don't want that to be the conclusion, right? Like I want to be part of the solution. And if people are just around to be shitty, you're not contributing a whole lot to this space. So we'll just put it that way.
Well, yeah, you said it might be moving in that direction. The only quibble I would take is I think it fucking moved there a long time ago. I think and I get people's frustration with all aspects of modern life. I share a lot of those same frustrations, but yeah, it's so much easier to nitpick, and instead of dealing with the realities of the situation sometimes, which is that there isn't any money at every step of the way. It's like the publishers aren't making very much money. The art reps aren't making very much money. The creators aren't making money. I mean, there's outside of your Marvels and DCs and maybe the Image offices. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of money being made in comics by anybody, unless they're working at whoever publishes Raina,
Scholastic, yeah.
Scholastic. They're probably raking in bucks, and
I hope they are. Good for them.
Yeah. And Viz, the Japanese publishers, they're probably doing pretty damn well too, I would imagine. But for American stuff, especially American stuff that has any sort of personal vision, you're really pushing the boulder up the hill, and there'll be the occasional Jeff Smith who pokes through and is a crossover success, but most people, it's just not going to happen. It would be nice if it wasn't quite as soul crushing for everyone in the middle. There used to be a viable way in the 20th century, there was a viable way for people who weren't going to get the brass ring, but they could at least make a living and do well for themselves. And now it's a lot of those opportunities have just evaporated.
Yeah. And I think, and we see a lot of like infighting within these spaces too, which I think is a strategy of the elite. Not to get too like Marxist on you. Sorry, I'm a cultural studies person, but I see a lot of the sort of like little fights happening within some of the spaces we inhabit, and I think, it's totally important to engage and to critique and to kind of have conversations about the language that we use, the folks that we celebrate, the folks that don't get noticed, who we sort of raise up, et cetera, et cetera. But I think oftentimes, these spaces are set up to not allow you to see what's actually happening behind the curtain, right? Like what are the big issues in comics, in publishing in general, right? And I am really committed to focusing on the positive communal collaborative spaces where we can still be critical of each other and work together, but you can't have everything you want, right? Like it's impossible to have everything that you want and be successful. You have to make compromise. And I hope that these spaces continue to find ways to work together and to find ways through, right? To continue to be successful, to be successful, right? Because otherwise, everything else is these companies that just want to get IP and run with that for forever, so they can squeeze every dollar they can out of these spaces. Does Disney care about physical comics?
No,
I don't think so.
Actually, you would be surprised. As a company that's about to start putting out I work for a company that's about to start putting out single issues of Disney comics at the
but slightly, yes. The Donald Ducks,
but why? I don't know. I don't know. Why
Interesting. Maybe they'll save us.
Yeah, I doubt it. But but at the same time, the Disney money does help facilitate the Noah Skivers and the MS Harknesses and people like that getting their new book out. On that note of positivity, let's end on this, which is, what do you have cooking in the near future? What is there to look forward to for the 5th year of Athenaeum?
Oh gosh, still lots of things in the works. We'll see what actually comes to fruition. I think at the beginning of each year, I have all these big goals. Some of them I hit, and some of them I don't. Which I think is okay. Like you should be lofty in what you're thinking about, but trying to be more kind of reasonable with some of them this year, I suppose. But just a few things. I hope to be able to do a YouTube chat with Alison Bechtel. We've been talking about that for a little bit. I think she's coming down from the tour of her latest book, but want to do something special for her and do another art drop here sometime later this year. So I think that's pretty exciting. On the 29th, which is coming up faster than I thought, I was looking at the date and I was like, oh shit. Going to be doing a chat with Rosemary, Tilly, Caroline, and MS as kind of our 4-year big celebration. There are reasons why I kind of think of them as an interesting group of folks. But I think folks will be really excited. Not all of them. I mean, Rosemary and Tilly don't do a ton of interviews, period. I guess none of them really do. But I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. We're just working on a time for it right now. So that'll be introduced soon. We're also doing a new t-shirt design. Rosemary Valero O'Connell is doing the design for a new t-shirt, which is beautiful. We're just working on how do we make it, she's so detailed. How do we get it onto a t-shirt is the next phase. Hopefully we'll get that out before the end of the month. In terms of spaces, physical spaces, definitely plan on going to Heroes Con again next year. So that'll be exciting. The other big piece of news, I think is almost 100%, but is Tilly Walden and I are going to go to Italy for the Lake Como Original Art Festival. We're close to making that happen. We're just working on a few last things, but I'm pretty sure that Tilly was announced at the last festival that's coming this coming year. So that will be an exciting international trip for us. And then lastly, I have some like crazy ideas. I want to have an animation built up for the beginning of these YouTube videos by one of the artists I work with, who is an animator, which will be exciting. As well as I have this idea for like a Athenaeum commercial where I get some collectors as well as artists to kind of do like testimonials that we'll like edit together and do like a old timey, not quite an infomercial, but something fun, like that. If you, Colin knows this, but to the audience, I tend to do things that I just like think are cool. I probably should be more strategic in branding and thinking about getting the word out there. But I honestly, I think leaning into my like elder millennial social media prowess has worked out thus far. Being a little silly, not taking ourselves too seriously, not worrying about cringe stuff. But at the same time, being a little bit professional as compared to some others. It's a balance that I think millennials are particularly good at. So I'm going to go down that route. But those are the things that I can talk about that I'm particularly excited about.
That's great. And as far as you mentioned going to Lake Como, any shows that you're targeting specifically? I mean, I know that that's a fluid thing for you, but any that are on your wish list that you either want to go to for the first time or get back to?
Well, Angoulême is definitely up there on the list of must do's at some point.
Might not be the best year.
Not this year. Not this year. Go read about it. Google that. I think it'll be interesting to see what it turns out to be, but that's definitely high up on the list. There's the Montreal small press show that I think Elizabeth Pitch, one of the artists I work with, is going to be there next year. What's that? What's the Montreal one called? Do you know? Montreal Comics something or other.
No, I don't know it.
It sounds like a cool show that a lot of folks have gone to in the past. San Diego, we didn't have a chance to talk about San Diego. I went for the first time this year, and it blew my mind. I didn't think that it would be a show that I'd be into, but interestingly, you can kind of compartmentalize the show and make it whatever you like. And I was able to connect with a ton of collectors, ton of artists, art reps. It's a really fabulous space. I know people kind of shit on it for it being too many people, and I get that. If you're not into large crowds, probably not the best place to go. But in terms of like everyone that matters in comics that is influential in one way or another is at San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, Fantagraphics has a huge presence at San Diego Comic-Con. So I want to go again. I don't know if I'll ever be able to table because it's ridiculously expensive, but also even just trying to get a space is near impossible. But I would like to go again. When I came back, I said I would go every year, which is probably true, but it's a pain in the butt to try and like make that work. So I will go as often as I can to San Diego. Yeah. That's probably the big shows. I don't know if folks have other ideas about shows that are more art friendly. I mean, Heroes I finally did, and that it lived up to the hype, I think. But if anyone has other shows that they would recommend that they think would be good. I was surprised at San Diego because everyone talks about kind of the pop culture stuff, the movie stuff, the TV stuff. I just didn't go over to that part of the show, like I didn't see any of that. And so I'm wondering if there are other spaces kind of like that are more friendly to these spaces. But I think like a lot of it now is just like OAX, where the big collectors go. So that's a show that I'll be at, and hopefully tabling at this year. And it's a great show. I've been trying to get you, Colin, to go to OX for a while now.
Yeah. I haven't been buying as much art, and I'm philosophically, I'm not a window shopper, you know. So if I have the intent to buy, I love to empty my pockets. But if I'm just going to be a looky loo, I'll save that for museums usually. But
I'll be there. You can buy stuff for me, Colin.
That's very true. That's very true. One of these years I might get there. I think next year Heroes Con's the one I'm targeting.
Oh, so good.
Like to go to. Sounds like it's a good mix of the things I'm interested in. I can dig through, shitty mainstream comics from the 80s and that kind of stuff, and then also go check out all the artists. Last thing, we would be remiss. We haven't mentioned it yet once. A2CAF. You have your own show. You didn't even mention your own show. So let's talk about your own show that you are helping to put together and will be hosting. It's rapidly
coming around the corner, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let me look up the date.
I was able to go to the first one you did a couple of years ago. I met some of the guys in person from the Discord. We should also just once more shout out the Discord, which people should go check out. It's a great friendly space to talk about original art, I think. But yeah, I really enjoyed visiting A2CAF, and I'd love to hear what you have going on this year.
Yeah, it's so funny. I do so many things that I forgot to even write it down on our list. And I had to look it up because we changed the date and I couldn't remember the date. So October 11th in Ann Arbor, Michigan, we have our third year of A2CAF, small and indie press. A2CAF has been a kind of brand show in Ann Arbor for over a decade. For the first 10 years or so, it was more of a kind of kid-oriented show. This past year, it was super exciting because they had Raina Teglemeier this summer, Scott McCloud, and I'm blanking on Tony Weaver, who is an amazing public speaker. Gosh, they were all fabulous. But 3 years ago, we kind of branched off to create more of a show for older teens and adults called Small Indie Press that we do in the fall. And we've been very successful over the years. We brought in some fabulous folks like Jaime Hernandez at our first show, Jillian Tamaki. We had Tilly, we had Trung, we've had Ebony Flowers. The list goes on. This year, we're super excited. Eisner Award-winning Athenaeum cartoonist Caroline Cash is one of our headliners. We also have Julia Wirtz, who does fabulous graphic novels. If you haven't had a chance to read her books, I highly recommend. Some memoirs, really great memoir work, as well as other books, but highly I had come to her work a little bit later and I was blown away. And then Lisa Hannawalt, who's both a cartoonist in the comic sense as well as the animation sense. And it's interesting. I've been a fan of Lisa's for a long time, but she's the one that when I bring up her name, people go wild over. They're like, how did you get Lisa Hannawalt? And I'm like so out of like animation world. I mean, like I was into it when I was watching The Simpsons 20 years ago, but I am out of it, and I forget that Lisa is kind of a big deal in animation as well as comics. So really excited for this group of creators. It's a good time. It kind of feels like what I imagine like old timey cons were, with just like very intimate. We have a little over 50 creators who will be there. So it's just one day, 11 to 5. You can talk to folks, right? You can see some really exciting creators that you may know already, or you may see for the first time at that show. And it's a real community vibe. And if you're someone who, if you talk to me, I do a brunch with the artists and friends of the show at my house the Sunday after. So if you're in the area and you want to see some cool artists, and typically my buddy George Hagenauer, who's a longtime collector, will bring some fabulous portfolios of art that you cannot believe exists in front of you. So it's a really good time. I love the show. Please come out to it. I think it's going to be a good one this year.
Perfectly said. All right. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Thanks to anybody who was here in the chat hanging out, and thanks to anybody who tunes in the future to listen to us Babylon. It's always fun to see Sean in person via camera and and chat like in real time, not just typing with our thumbs.
Yes. Well, and I want to say before we go, again, I know we started at the beginning with Canon, but go to what's your website, or where can they go buy it?
Our store is and there's my friend Alex.
Right. Hey, Alex.
Mr. Eklund. Hi, Alex. canonzine.bigcartel.com, though like I said, very soon we're supposed to have a website going with and hopefully everything will be back in print and available in the near future. You know, we have jobs, we have lives, but Alex has been grinding away on that on the side, and hopefully that'll be available soon.
And the special issue you did on the top 100 comics of all time is so fucking good. So interesting. You should pick it up if you haven't. Well, you can tell the folks a little bit about that one.
Well, currently out of print, but not for long. It will be available once our web store is up. But and I have to say, I was looking at this a couple nights ago for something else I'm doing. I was like, oh, let me look and see how I did this in this issue. And I looked at my wife, Tammy, and said, we did a pretty good fucking job on this. Like I had almost kind of forgotten like how good a job Alex and I did. It's not a perfect publication, but I'm very proud of it. But in 1999, the Comics Journal did the top 100 comics of the 20th century. And I've been obsessed with that single issue in that list ever since. And so this is a publication devoted just to that list, just to how they made it, everything that went into it. And I devote a lot more time and space to that subject than you would think would be possible. And still could have done more, I'm sure. At a certain point, I had to stop it and just call it off. But, I was able to talk to Eric Reynolds and Gary Groth and all the surviving list makers talked to me. I was able to talk to Seth, who did the original cover, which was a real highlight. Here's Seth's original cover that Noah's cover was paying homage to. But yeah, just
I loved was it Eric Reynolds, who I can't remember. They all were a little bit like, I barely remember like what this is about. Yeah, they all were just sort of like what, and I think Gary Groth especially was just sort of like, I don't remember. But as he started talking, it started to kind of trigger some memories. And, after the fact, I talked to Eric about it. He was happy I did it. He was really good friends with Tom Spurgeon, who was the editor of that original issue. They remained very close up until Spurgeon's death. And, for those who have been around following comics for a while, Tom Spurgeon ran the Comics Reporter. That was literally the first thing every day, once I got a smartphone. I put my glasses on and went to comicsreporter.com for years and years. That was the very first part of my day, and really important guy to me. And he was one of the founders of CXC, which is a show I really enjoy. And I never spoke to him in person, even though I was in the room with him a couple times. And a big regret of mine. Spurgeon used to always say, write letters to the people you
when you love their work, go up and say hi and tell them you like their work. He wasn't saying it for his own benefit. He was saying it for cartoonists, but it applies to guys like him too, like if you valued someone's work, it's always nice to just say so. And sincerity is fine. It's cool to care, and you should let people know.
It's cool to care. That's the next T-shirt we're gonna do together.
Yeah. It's it's like, as we've talked about 100 times in the last hour and 45 minutes, there's not a lot of money, right? So letting people know that somebody out there values their work, either their published work or their original work, is a nice thing to do. It can keep people going,
Yeah. I think that's a good way to wrap things up. And what a legacy that guy had. And I think, the work that you're doing, both the sort of kind of looking at comics critically, but also celebrating spaces that don't get enough attention. I think it's historic, right? It's really important what you're doing to capture these histories that I think are going to be lost if we aren't doing it. And I'm glad it's in physical form, because then YouTube can't steal it from you.
That's true.
Like they have in the past. So
that's very true.
Well, thank you, Colin. I really appreciated, always appreciate chatting with you, of course. And it's always great to be able to celebrate another year of Athenaeum with you. So thank you. And thank you all to those of you who watched live, who've been here for almost 2 hours. Appreciate your time. And I think that's a great way to kind of leave it, is go tell the people that you appreciate, that you love in these creative spaces. Go tell them that it can mean the world. I get notes from folks. I got Rice Krispie waffle treats from a collector the other day, and it is, just a little bit of thanks can go a long way, particularly in spaces where there isn't a lot of thanks that come to us. So, all right, everyone, have a great Sunday, and feel free, reach out, buy Colin's books, buy Noah's book that we did together, buy some art, and say thank you to some of the artists you love. We'll see you. We'll see you next year.
Yeah, we'll see you for number 5.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.